Your government hates you. A comprehensive list of the U.S. government's abusive actions against its own people. I should preface that. All right, let's get into it. No, I will not list every source I pulled information from. All right, look, I pulled some from Britannica, some from YouTube videos. Most of this is declassified documents or was admitted to by the government when journalists forced them to, and those journalists were later assassinated for it. You won't be seeing any graphic photos. Of course, I will speculate from time to time, but I'll preface when I'm about to give speculation, and it's a conspiracy theory. Okay. This man, I straight plagiarized like the first 2 talking points of his video. His name is DJ Peach Cobbler on YouTube. He made a great video on it. It's very funny. You should go watch it. It's like 30 minutes long. And no, I'm not ashamed. All right, 1947. The CIA is founded as a part of the National Security Act. It can operate in complete secrecy, and the American public has no clue what it's doing at any time. And so the public reaction to this was not pleasant. Their reactions were, what? This is democracy? Our whole point is that we know what our government's doing. What do you mean you're not telling us what they're doing? What makes these people any different from the Gestapo or the KGB? The answer in reality was nothing. They just did the exact same stuff that they would do. Quelling the backlash and lying directly to people, so the CIA's charter said, we will not operate on American soil, which doesn't make it any better because they're still, murdering people abroad, but whatever. And this quote is pulled directly from the FBI's website. The CIA collects information only regarding foreign countries and their citizens. Unlike the FBI, it is prohibited from collecting information regarding U.S. persons, a term that includes U.S. citizens, resident aliens, legal immigrants, and U.S. corporations, regardless of where they are located. You know that image. That's the CIA feeding low-income neighborhoods and the Central America crack. Yeah. Don't worry about it. CIA gets to basically do whatever it wants. The CIA was appointed an overseeing committee. However, most of the overseeing committee was run by people who were paid by the CIA. So what are you going to do? Are you going to regulate the CIA if they have you on their payroll? If there is one agency of the government in which we must take some matters on faith without constant examination of its methods and sources, I believe this agency to be the Central Intelligence Agency. Senator Richard Russell, head of the CIA Oversight Committee. So that's basically the government going, hey, do your job. No. So just so you know, they have no one overseeing them, which will provide some context to the next things they were doing. They lied to the President of the United States. The CIA mostly regulated themselves and reported only to the President, which was at the time Dwight D. Eisenhower. They just lied to him, blatantly, to his face.
He's the idiot.
What the CIA told my boy, Dwighty Whitey. This is the CIA. Soviet Union has hundreds of ICBMs, which is intercontinental ballistic missiles, nuclear bombs, pointed directly at the United States. And there's a massive difference in the quantity, the payload that they have. They are much stronger than us. They can go much longer distances than us. So apparently the USSR had somehow jumped years, decades ahead of us in nuclear technology, except, that's a lie, because they developed a nuclear bomb, how many years after we did? Way after we did. 6 years. So they were 6 years behind, but somehow they were now 20, 50 years ahead of us in nuclear technology. So by lying to the President of the United States, they lied to Congress, which meant they also lied to the entire American public. This caused mass panic. It's the large reason for the Red Scare, because the CIA directly lied to the President of the United States, and they definitely still do. That's a conspiracy theory. just so you know. How many missiles were actually pointed at the United States? The Soviets had a handful, about 3 from what we know. Now, to be fair, that's very concerning. You don't want any nuclear missiles pointed at your country at all. But they still lied to the most powerful man on the planet and caused mass panic. Petrodollar warfare. This is another term that's conspiracy theory. In 1971, President Richard Nixon repealed the gold standard. What does that mean? It meant the US dollar now has no intrinsic value, and our paper money is worth literally nothing. So, to explain this concept to you, the US dollar used to be backed by silver and gold, which tied it to actually valuable metal, so that meant your dollars had security. Now, your paper money is just paper money. It has no value. Just so you know.
It's valued because we say usually.
Yeah. So this led to the establishment of OPEC. One of the US senators, was he a senator or congressman? He went to Saudi Arabia and spoke to one of the kings there. And he said, essentially, if you're gonna export oil, you're gonna do it in US dollars. What does this do? It makes the US dollar valuable because now the US dollar is tied to oil and everybody uses oil. So if you're exporting it in oil, if you're exporting it in US dollars, that means everyone has to buy it in US dollars, which means there's a constant demand for US dollars. This expanded to several other countries, which created the OPEC agreement. It got violated by Saddam Hussein. Hussein committed multiple human rights violations and caused the deaths of thousands of people, like the invasions of Kuwait or Iran. Now, he did get destroyed both times, but don't worry about it. He still used biological weapons on like Kurdish civilians. But his real sin, and the reason the CIA took interest in him, he decided to stop selling oil in US dollars and preferred to sell them in euros. Now, this was incredibly problematic for the federal government. Now, I will say that part of this is a conspiracy theory because they don't want you to talk about the whole after the human rights violations. Also, this isn't even going over the fact that the CIA established Saddam Hussein as the dictator of Iraq, but that's a completely different story. In 2003, America made the decision that it was now a necessity to invade Iraq on account of the fact that they had violated the rules of the OPEC agreement. Now, officially, that's a lie. What I just told you is a conspiracy theory. We did not invade for oil. What did we invade for? You can read that if you want, I don't care. So, what's the real reason we invaded Iraq? After assessment by the United Nations, this was after they had invaded a few countries in the 1990s, the United Nations determined that they did have biological, you get the idea. They had weapons of mass destruction. Now, they worked with them and they actually disassembled them, and Iraq was cooperative in this time. That's what the UN reported. So after this, they determined that Iraq was not in possession or capable of manufacturing any weapons of mass destruction, biological, chemical, nuclear, or radiological. Now, this was after they destroyed all the plants to produce this stuff. They had disabled all the weapons. However, the CIA disagreed. In October of 2002, the CIA published this book claiming that Iraq had lied to the UN and had continued producing CBRN weapons, Iraq's weapons of mass destruction programs. This book is a lie. It's full of complete nonsense. The CIA believed that Hussein, I can't pronounce his name, Hussein possessed weapons of mass destructions and justified the war based on this. So this is why we invaded Iraq, according to the CIA. Problem was that in over a decade of invading and occupying the country, no proof of this ever emerged. None of it was ever found. None of it was ever used, except for that one time in 2016 where a biological weapon was used by ISIS on US troops. Now, nobody got hurt by that, just want to preface, but I'd like to make a statement that ISIS wouldn't exist if the US hadn't invaded Iraq, so that's a fun little fact. So we're faced with two possibilities from this explanation here. Either the CIA is incompetent and it thought that they had weapons when they didn't, and they were all just stupid, and its negligence led to the death of over 4,000 American servicemen and servicewomen. Or the CIA intentionally lied to justify the invasion of Iraq because they were no longer providing value to the US dollar. Now you tell me which one of those makes more sense. It's not a rhetorical question.
They're both stupid.
They're both
Second
stupid.
one.
Can you turn off the speaker?
I don't know how to do that.
Turn the knob.
Far right knob.
Oh,
Okay.
that was so nice.
Next talking point.
Okay.
MK Ultra. So I'm very shocked to find out that almost none of you know about this if I ask what it is. So here's a little lesson for you. From 1953 to 1973, the CIA experimented with different methods of psychological torture and narcotics to invent mind control. And that's what they really were doing. Oh, did I? That's all right. Trotter. All right, whatever. Point was, they were trying to invent mind control. Now, you might realize this is Looney Tunes garbage. This isn't real. You can't do mind control, but they tried, and they experimented on not only US civilians, but also tons of people abroad. But we're gonna be looking into one person in particular. CIA was mainly using hallucinogens. Thank you. And LSD to get the results it wanted. Other methods were electroshock therapy, starvation, dehydration, sound torture, and much more. One of the directors of this project, actually, they took a 19-year-old honors student and they did this to her, and by the end of it, she urinated on the floor, she babbled like a baby, and the dude who was director of all this, he was proud of it. He wrote in a letter that it was a success, and he was happy with the results. They might have created a terrorist on accident. Ted Kaczynski was a bright young man attending college in 1958. A few months after Ted was contacted to participate in a psychological test that was meant to study the effects of cold stress on the human psyche.
Why we sat? Can you say on accident?
It was not on purpose. I don't think they did this on purpose. So essentially what they would do is they'd go to colleges and they would they would ask you if you wanted to participate in something, but they wouldn't tell you what you were participating in. So you were consenting something that you didn't know what it was. That's not consent. You can't consent to something that you don't know about. They were just forcing people, like they would offer like payments and whatnot. So what did they do to Kaczynski, the poor little man?
God.
These experiments would entail Ted and other students writing papers on any given subject, being told to put as much effort as possible into writing it, and being told, you get it, grammar errors. After the students would turn in their papers, a law student, who was very excited, I'm sure, would come in and interrogate them. They would verbally berate, abuse, and mock the students just in order to upset them as much as they could. They also probably put LSD in Ted's coffee, which, you know, isn't good for a person over a long period of time. This would go on for years, about 3. From what we know, this greatly upset Ted, who was likely he was already traumatized in his childhood. He had an illness and he was locked in like a room for a year or so. He was bedridden, and he showed very little emotion after that. Yeah, he's a nutcase before college, but this didn't help. Ted built a small cabin in the woods in 1971 to escape from modern society, which he viewed as an evil. For 25 years, his philosophy would form. So he was like a math teacher for a brief period after graduating college, but he eventually got away from it. He had also...
Hold on, you're doing an injustice. He was a professor at Stanford.
Okay. He was a math teacher. He's just he's a very smart guy.
He
Is what you
He
should
had an
take.
IQ of like 167.
He was a genius. Ted
Dude's
was
that good at math.
Number
Either join the CIA or
Low-key.
become terrorists.
basically these are the 2 options. Yeah. He was a very smart man. He was a bright young man, but he had psychotic episodes. He had wanted to become like a woman at one point, and he was gonna go under reassignment surgery, but he backed out of it last minute, and like he wrote about, and he had an urge to murder people, stuff like that. So he was a little unhinged, as you can see. From 1978 to 1995, Ted remained active by mailing IEDs, which is improvised explosive devices, for those who don't know. So he just made bombs, and he mailed them to people whom he thought were furthering the progress of industrial society. Over the course of his career, he killed 3 people and injured over 20. Now, yeah, he had a career. He published a book called Industrial Society and Its Future, and he had like threatened the press that he was going to bomb them, so they published it in one of their articles. Overview of his philosophy. In 1995, Ted published his manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future. He illustrated his disillusion with modern civilization. So to explain this to you, we have to go over a little bit of human history. Ted believed that modern society neglected basic biological needs of human beings in favor of mass production. And in his God, I'm spurging out, give me a second. And that this manifested in extreme mental illness and disorders in just humans all over the globe. So I sympathize with this a little bit. I'm not Ted Kaczynski. I just want to preface this before I go off.
It's an important disclaimer.
Are you Colin Kramer, the next Ted Kaczynski?
No. So, human needs. Physiologically, modern humans emerged nearly 200,000 years ago. Mentally, modern humans, what that means is that's as far back as you could go and grab a human baby and raise it in modern civilization. It would be able to do everything. Like it would be intelligent as you or I. About 170,000 years ago is when they evolved. Most living in hunter-gatherer societies, they knew everyone in their communities, they had constant physical exercise, constant contact with nature, and they had clear social roles and purposes to their lives. What does this mean? It means that you are the exact same as those people 170,000 years ago. This is a very hard concept for people to understand, but we haven't really evolved since then. You have the exact same needs as they do. You're not like in any way different from them besides your like bone structure and whatnot. So mentally, they were on the same level as you. Now, you might realize 170,000 years is a long time. That's what humans adapted to living like. So over those 170,000 years, we had a very specific lifestyle. In the past 12,000 years, the agricultural revolution took off, and that changed everything. So now people could stay from places. You all took 6th grade history. You get the idea. We farm now, we could stay in the same place, we eat food, we're not all starving and dying. You get the idea. 150 years ago, the industrial revolution took off. I'm sorry, I'm having like a nervous breakdown because I'm afraid I'm gonna get in trouble for this.
I'm posting this on YouTube.
Oh God, what's the next slide?
No, don't worry. I have to rant about this for a while. So now what do people live like? We live in basically anthill societies where you don't know a lot of people. Now, not you guys, since you live in Chapman, Kansas. We're an agrarian area, so we have small social groups, but you gotta understand that like 80%, 90% of human beings don't live like us. They have very little social contact with people they know. They're stuck in these incredibly small areas to live. They basically are in these artificial environments. They have no contact with nature. They eat garbage food. They sleep terribly. And so what does that create? It creates people who are mentally ill, people who are physically ill, people who are upset all the time. Why do you think depression is skyrocketing? It's because people do not live how our ancestors lived. Now, I'm not saying that we should live like cavemen. I'm simply saying that we have natural needs that are not being fulfilled by industrial society. And that's why you likely get depressed from time to time. or feel like lethargic from time to time. You're not happy because we're not living in a civilization that caters to our needs. Now, I don't want to stress Mr. Rutherford out. Now, I'm not suggesting overthrowing industrial society. Ted Kaczynski, however, his idea was...
Ted, are you on first name
no.
basis with
Okay, I'm just
him?
making sure we're headed.
Okay,
Are you on
Me and
first name
Ted.
basis with Ted?
He's still alive.
modern civilization throws off all our biological needs. You get the idea.
Colorado.
Ted sought to overthrow this by starting a revolution and inciting violence by exploiting the disenfranchised. So his idea was basically empowering people in ghettos and whatnot and starting, he wanted to start nuclear warfare in a sense. He wanted to send us back to the Stone Age so we could live how we did all those thousands of years ago. Now, he's psychotic, so I'm not saying that any of you should really agree with his methods or his ideology. I'm saying that you people should maybe take a step back from technology, and you should maybe eat a bit healthier, get a bit more physical exercise, have larger social groups.
Go outside.
Go outside.
Touch some grass.
Eat a
So
moon
I did go
pie.
outside
Now-
yesterday. I took pictures of cows.
And maybe reform society in a peaceful manner. Do not ship IEDs in the mail to people.
Oh god.
Stop, go
No,
back.
Go back.
Hold on.
Go back.
That's the last
Alright.
slide.
We only have 4 minutes. Go.
Okay. Waco. The government murders children.
I can tell the Waco story.
Okay.
Go Ruby. What's Ruby Ridge? I don't know.
You'll learn. Okay. The siege lasted 51 days against a cult. They lived in this big house like a few miles away from Waco, Texas. And the reason they had started sieging is because there were reports of like the cult leaders, they were taking like 11-year-olds as wives and whatnot. They were a doomsday cult. They thought Jesus was gonna come back in a few years and the rapture was gonna happen. So they were crazy.
They had illegal firearms.
Yeah, they had illegal firearms. That's why the ATF cares, which are these fellow gentlemen breaking into the building. So,
About
I would like to add
about
that the
50
license that they needed
cost
to make like the
15
automatic weapon
cost
was
$15.
$15.
yeah. So the siege was justified in a sense.
No, it
Oh,
wasn't.
you're
No,
good.
it wasn't.
Okay.
I will argue.
Okay, give me a second. All right. It was carried out by the FBI and the ATF. ATF basically just monitors alcohol, tobacco products, and firearms. FBI investigates things with the idea. Now, what did this result in? The siege killed over 80 people, and a ton of those were children. There's an FBI agent posing in the rubble, and there's multiple pictures of FBI agents, like smiling and posing, like in the smoldering remains of like dead women and children.
The dude on the left is
That's
cult
not
Yeah,
leader.
that's the cult leader.
That's not the real David Koresh, that's the actor.
Yeah, whatever. You get the idea. He looked like that. He was crazy.
Oh, yeah.
He had a mullet and glasses, and he
And he had 20 wives, so
Yeah,
he has more game than
All
and some of
14.
them were 11-year-olds. So the siege was a little justified in that sense, but also they murdered those same 11-year-olds. So, and Reagan went on TV and said, "This is a great success. I'm glad we burned down this building with 70 children in it." That was
Not quoted words.
That's exactly what he said. Now that's the
I
last.
love mixing. That's why we had Watergate.
Now that's the last slide, but okay, Ruby Ridge, to get the basic idea across to you. A guy was he was not doing anything illegal. He knew a guy who was a neo-Nazi, and he reportedly had illegal firearms. And so the ATF, they set up a perimeter around his house, and they shot his dog. And then when his 14-year-old son saw that an officer had shot his dog, he said he went a little ballistic and he shot at a federal agent, which meant that a 14-year-old boy got shot. 14-year-old boy dies. They shoot the guy's wife. They shoot the guy's daughter. Yeah, they kill everyone but this guy and his friend. I think his friend survived.
Alright, wrap it up. Say bye.